The power swap. If you have characters with special abilities in some kind of long-running format, it almost becomes inevitable. At some point, they're gonna swap powers. Somehow. At least for a little bit. When it comes to the Fantastic Four, it's surprising it hasn't happened more often. Marvel's first family has remained fairly firmly attached to their specific power sets for most of their history. So the rare times that they do swap powers stand out. And it's pretty amusing that at one point that happened twice in the same year. The year was 2007. The sources, Fantastic Four 2, aka Fantastic Four: The Rise of the Silver Surfer, and the oft-memory hold Fantastic Four: World's Greatest Heroes, which tackled the power swap in the episode Bait and Switch, which is not the most accurate title, since a bait and switch is a deceptive practice where you lure somebody in with one idea and then give them something else. But no, this episode is power swap, and pretty much only power swap. The episode also employs a Bewitched-style title card, which amuses me, because that's very witchy and it seems like something that would bother Reed, because what happened here was entirely science mishap. In the comics, as mentioned, this wasn't something they hopped to right away. They do body swap before we get to power swap, and in some ways it makes sense. When you have new characters, you want to establish them first before you go around swapping their powers all out. A notable instance of the team having different powers in an almost swap occurs in 1977. And this was in a what if. What if the Fantastic Four had different powers, which was from issue number 6, which we did a video on this channel. It's a good time. Reed becomes a huge brain and takes over a building. Another flirtation with the idea comes from a later issue of What If, issue 11 from 1990, which gives us what if the Fantastic Four all had the same power, wherein each member is given the same power set. You just get to see the different variations play out. When it comes to main continuity and swapping powers, we have Johnny and Sue. Their swap occurred during the Mark Waid era of the Fantastic Four, and it was an entire plot line. It began in 2004. The swap happened in issue 519, and it was because Sue was about to sacrifice herself because her powers were viewed as a threat by the survivors. They feared that her powers would be able to uncloak the planets they'd hidden from Galactus. This is extreme cliff notes, by the way. So to save her from having to sacrifice herself, Reed made it seem like he took her powers away, but in reality he swapped her and Johnny's. But of course things go awry before he can swap them back. Johnny ends up being made Galactus's herald while having Sue's powers. There was a 4-issue arc, it was called Rising Storm. Their powers ended up hopping around the city by the end, and so then they have a final extra issue. By 524 they have them back. Much shenanigans. While it would seem like a well that you may want to mine often, an episode like Bait and Switch demonstrates why that's not the case. It's also got some very mid-aughts hip and happening moments, which are amusing in retrospect.
How do you do, fellow kids?
I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics. Let's take a look at Bait and Switch and examine why, for the most part, it's best that the team's powers stay put. This episode was written by Bob Ford, Craig Kyle, and Christopher Yost, and it was directed by Frank Michelle. It opens on a classic and for a time reoccurring Fantastic Four plot, Reed trying to cure Ben Grimm. The first instance of this was Fantastic Four number 8, which was also the first appearance of the Puppet Master. This episode will follow the base format of most of those trying to cure Ben plots, in that the cure element ends up being secondary to the main plot, which will be what facilitates the reason for Ben wanting to return back to his original form and the status quo.
Come on, guys. You're acting like Reed's some kind of mad scientist. How about a little trust in your leader? So, is it safe to come out?
As far as you know.
Reed often sounds like he's a few bad days away from turning into the Maker in this series. It's great. Now, this series doesn't always adapt specific issues like some of the previous Fantastic Four animated series did, but it nails the spirit and vibe of the team. Just look at this Namor clip where they both dialed back him being a creep but kept that relationship between him and Sue.
You are an impressive human, Susan Stoll.
Were you actually serious about staying in Atlantis?
Maybe.
The complex and problematic relationship between Namor and Sue is comic history. It must be honored. Give me the mess. I mean, yes, we can move past it, but acknowledge that it was kind of there in the first place. She was keeping Namor on the back burner as a just in case for a bit, and he genuinely liked her. It was the 60s writing that was making it even more of a hot mess than it already was. Anyway, we were talking about power swaps. This experiment that Reed was doing goes awry, and their powers end up swapping. Johnny with Sue, and Reed and Ben. Now, of course, you have the obvious jokes to reach for, and this episode leads into them hard. And those jokes are, they don't know how to control the powers. And also that they're both more annoying and more useful than they thought. There's positives and negatives. The thing, unintentional Fantastic Four puns aside, with jokes like this is that they can quickly wear out their welcome, and that happens fast in this episode.
Hey! You've got my powers! Give them back! Your powers are lame!
It's largely because these jokes end up being repeated. Because what usually carries these plots are other factors. Some kind of urgency, usually about swapping back, or a mystery as to how and why this happened. A burning desire to see the status quo resumed. And herein lies why this concept doesn't fully work for this team, either in this episode or as a long-running idea surrounding the Fantastic Four. And it may be part of why it hasn't been all that utilized. The very nature of the Fantastic Four comic from outset is that bizarre things happen to them and they deal with it, and they're usually on a pretty big scale. Them swapping powers is small potatoes, and by the very nature of their lives, a minor inconvenience, and also something just based on how they handle things that they would just roll with and deal with. But that cuts out some of the tension, and so you need other things to drive the plot forward, and this episode lacks that. This episode happens to do a poor job laying out the mystery of what happened, so there's not much curiosity on that front. And that's because this episode decides it's gonna lean really heavily into the humor of the situation.
The pizza bit me or something!
It was probably hot, Johnny.
Hot? Oh.
Which of course isn't to say there isn't humor present, because there is, but that they can't control their powers, as mentioned, runs out fast. And then they start to attempt to pivot to the mystery, which wasn't very well established. And so they need to find more humorous elements to layer on top.
And I thought you looked ridiculous when they made you out of rocks.
For the majority of the episode, the Doom plot and the swap powers plot feel like completely disparate plot points, even though they are connected. It's just the fact that you know that even if it was permanent, they would deal with it. There's just not much emotion to invest in this, which is surprising. Just because of the characters involved, there's a lot of emotion that could be mined.
Reed, I'm sorry. I didn't want it to be like this.
Don't worry about it now.
Another factor, and it's something that the comics does as well with their powers, is that early on it ties them to their base character traits. Their powers match them. So there's a bit of a sense that each person's power was meant for them, which again makes the swap a very short-lived narrative potential, but also explains why they may have steered clear of it for so long. Their powers are part of who they are, and that's part of what makes Ben so tragic. I mean, Johnny's powers stem from a negative personality trait. Hot-headed, short-tempered. Oh, sorry, short-fused, that's better, more fiery. But they don't alter his life in the same way, because they're not a constant. Now, as for why their powers were swapped, Doom. But he wasn't trying to do it on purpose, unfortunately, because that would have been great and right up his alley. That's exactly the kind of petty thing I expect from Doom. It also would have been amusing and detracted from something awkward that nobody wants to talk about, which is that nobody wants Ben's powers. Just in general, whatever the medium, the team are usually pretty happy with their powers, except for Ben, for obvious reasons. There are so many negatives to Ben's powers, and it's not just that it changes how he looks and how people treat him. It also apparently comes with a potential loss of feeling, which is devastating.
I can feel this, and this, and that.
As a kid, I never thought about whether the thing had nerves that connected it in the same way, and now I can't stop thinking about it. I'm worried about Ben. It's mentioned sometimes, I don't know, I never fully thought about it, and now I'm living in it. That's the other reason this episode is a bit of a mess if one stops to think about it. It opens up all these ideas and then drops them because it has no time for, / doesn't really want to deal with them. It's just trying to stretch the whole team swaps powers concept to a full episode length because it doesn't have anything else to rely on. And it's frankly struggling to fill the time a little bit. I say struggling because it randomly introduces the idea that they've also swapped some character traits over halfway into the episode.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was mean. No, that was funny.
This isn't for any kind of added urgency that they need to switch back, like they're also altering their core personalities, because that would be something, but no, it's for more jokes.
Gotcha. That's what you get for being the hothead.
Did you get a reading? What are these things?
Yeah. I mean, yes.
Like that they can't control the power jokes, they have to stretch them, that one was intentional, out. The thing is, there's a lot of good ideas here, which makes this episode a little bit frustrating. On the whole, it's fine, but it's just you have these kernels of lots of really good ideas that are being flirted with. And then because they're introduced and don't go anywhere, it makes the ideas feel very incomplete. However, here are some things the episode does very well without having to go into overt detail. It has the members reach for their former abilities, which demonstrates just how second nature they've become to them. It also has Ben seem to be the only one who's really enjoying his new abilities, even if they're new to him and do inconvenience him. This is one of those episodes where maybe just a few less jokes, not no jokes, just a few less and a bit more focus on some of the emotional beats that were going on could have really helped it, especially if the focus was going to stay on the power swap and not on any of the doom antics. And this series would have been a good fit for it because, as mentioned, it captures the team's dynamics so well. It's almost doing it here. All of the ideas are here. They get started, they just don't go. So if Doom wasn't trying to swap their powers, well, what was he doing? He was trying to bring something from another dimension by inverting Reed's power gauntlet. And the team needs to stop him, kinda. Also, Lucia von Bardas is there, cause she can be.
Intriguing.
My lord.
They do fight some Doombots though, and he sends the ones that are attuned to their specific powers, and they play it like that's a problem, but they're robots. They'll just move. It takes the robots way longer than it should have to realize that they need to switch targets. It's when the battle gets started that the episode really shines. It's where the power swap is at its strongest for a team like the Fantastic Four, who have such an interconnected dynamic. They've learned to work together almost seamlessly with their original power set. Now they have to learn to do it again. They have to relearn. They have to listen to each other. They have to throw aside their preconceived biases about the pros and cons of each other's powers and just really learn how to inhabit them. It can give them a fresh appreciation for the different assets that each brings to a battle and the different struggles and advantages that they each have. It's a different perspective, a walk a mile in someone else's shoes type deal. Now, of course, to no one's surprise who's up on these Fantastic Four, Reed and Ben trying to save him plots, Reed wasn't planning on changing back. He was gonna keep the Thing's powers. Even with the slight reduction in intellect, even though we can probably toss that last part out because it was just thrown in their last minute and the episode never really deals with it, it's just a joke.
And I don't know what that means.
That's because you used words with more than one syllable.
Now, if that hadn't been played more for laughs, that could have been such an amazingly profound moment. And they do have one later after the Thing does retake his form.
I don't know what to say, but I promise you, I won't give up.
I know you won't.
But just the idea of this sacrifice, it's a big one for Reed. Reed's intellect means so much to him. It's something he prizes highly, at times above his family and friends. So sacrifices like this, the moments where he does contemplate or does sacrifice bits for himself like this for them, they're momentous for Reed. Because typically, Reed will put the safety of the world or universe first, which I mean in a way is also putting them first, because they live there. But it can come across as cold, callous, and arrogant, and detached. He can also sometimes come to the wrong conclusion, or end up creating something fundamentally dangerous. Side note, that's why I hate when people take those aspects away from Reed and just present the nice guy Reed, and he's a great family man and father, and he loves his family and friends. The thing is, yes, he does love those things, but it's more complex than that. There are other priorities, and they can damage his relationship with them, and that's interesting. It's unique. Don't take that away from him or them or just the team. It's something so special to the Fantastic Four. Those complexities and nuances that can lead to conflict, that's largely why the Fantastic Four are so fascinating. It's deeper than just family vibes. The Fantastic Four often demonstrate those constant negotiations that go on living with family when there are distinct personality types, values, and then it adds big universe stakes and superhero things on top of it. The team thrive when the fun is balanced with all those aspects. The Fantastic Four need a little bit of an angsty, melodramatic edge, just a little bit, which is why it can fall a bit flat when attempts are made to lean too far into the, oh wow, what a quirky, happy family routine.
I hate to say it, but that was hot.
The climax of this episode is satisfying in that at first, Ben is going to let Reed make that sacrifice, but he finds he can't, and so he enters the dimensional void energy thing because they need to go into it to defeat it, but they can also switch back inside of there. And there are some nice moments in there, but also this Doom plot, it was threadbare. Everything around it was loose, but it got the job done. It would have been a stronger episode if the reverse had been true, if the Doom plot had been a bit more focused on, and then you had the power swap be a bit more of an accent. The jokes would have hit harder as a result because they wouldn't have had time to repeat as many of them, and they may have been forced to have to try and figure out what they were trying to say with the whole personalities tied to power thing, or drop it entirely for time. Because it opens up a whole can of worms. Does Johnny being a hothead make him use his fire powers better? Is that why he's not as good at using Sue's powers on top of the inexperience? Because if their powers are also coming with their personality, it's opening up a whole bunch of things. In short, I know too late. For the power swap to work well with the Fantastic Four, you have to think about it more than you do with other characters or teams, just because of the nature of their powers and existence. It's the same as with a team like the X-Men. It just requires more care to have narrative staying power or be interesting. But of course, like anything, it can be done, but you just have to apply a bit more love to it. Otherwise, it overstays its welcome fast, and as a joke, it lends itself better to one of those throwaway Marvel what the panels than an entire episode. I love this series, and this episode is fine, but it's not the strongest episode out there. It's not terrible, it's not great. It's no masterwork like the one where Doom and Reed body swap where Sue notices something is wrong wrong with Reed when he tries to spend time with her.
You're canceling your lectures?
I would prefer to spend my time with you.
What?
Hilarious. And yes, this series is both a body swap and a power swap. Swap meet. Anyway, all of those were just my thoughts. I really just want to talk about the Fantastic Four and this series. I want to hear all your thoughts. Do you like this episode? Do you not like it? Did you watch this series? Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree entirely? Let me know. I want to hear it all down there, respectfully, of course. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I love chatting the Fantastic Four. Is Galactus' head in the shot? It is. He's wearing his non-helmet head. I should put his helmet head back on. If you've been here a while, you'll know I love the Fantastic Four, even though I rarely talk about them. We're talking about them today. Share your thoughts, do all the YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some of our day spent discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.